At 9:17 on a rain-darkened Monday morning, Marcus Carter stood beneath the cold white lights of Liberty Shield Technologies' executive auditorium while a security guard held an empty cardboard box against his chest, as though Marcus were already too dangerous to touch anything himself. Less than 10 minutes earlier, Marcus had been reviewing a vulnerability report involving guidance sensors supplied to the United States Army. Now, his employee badge had been deactivated, his company phone had been locked remotely, and nearly 200 co-workers were watching the new chief executive erase 21 years of service with a sentence delivered in the flat tone of a man canceling a lunch reservation. "Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately," Brent Halpin announced from the polished walnut stage, one manicured hand resting beside a leather folder stamped "Confidential." The auditorium smelled of burnt coffee, damp wool coats, and the citrus disinfectant used on the rows of black vinyl chairs. Rain tapped steadily against the high glass panels overlooking Peachtree Street, turning the Atlanta skyline into a gray blur behind the American and Georgia flags positioned on either side of the company seal. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not plead. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, in a navy suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, his dark brown skin reflecting the harsh overhead light, his close-cut hair still neat despite the humidity, and his strong hands resting motionless at his sides. Only the tightening of his jaw revealed what the public humiliation was costing him. At the rear of the room, partially hidden behind the glass door, his 10-year-old daughter Grace watched with her red winter coat zipped to her chin and her blue school backpack hanging from one shoulder. Her school had closed that morning after the heating system failed, and Marcus had promised she could sit quietly in his office until he finished what he had called one boring meeting. Instead, she was watching 2 uniformed guards prepare to escort her father from the company he had helped build. Before we go any further, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what city or state you are watching from, because what happened after this hard-working single father walked out of that auditorium would expose a betrayal no one in the building was prepared to face. Brent glanced down at the termination papers and continued, "Your refusal to support our efficiency strategy has created unnecessary friction with senior leadership." Marcus looked past him toward a framed photograph of American soldiers standing beside a field communications unit developed by Liberty Shield. He knew those men and women trusted equipment bearing his company's name. He also knew the executives dismissing him had quietly reduced safety testing, hidden failed inspections, and threatened anyone who questioned the numbers. "You call defective equipment efficient?" Marcus Isao asked. His voice was low, controlled, and clear enough to reach the final row. A nervous silence spread across the room. Brent's mouth tightened. "This is not the appropriate forum." Marcus looked at the frightened engineers, veterans, and administrative workers who had spent months lowering their eyes whenever Brent passed. "That's the problem," he said. "You made sure there was never an appropriate forum." Melissa Crane, the director of human resources, rose from the front row wearing a cream-colored designer suit and pointed toward the cardboard box. "You may collect personal belongings under supervision. Your severance package is conditional upon signing a non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement." Her perfume reached Marcus before she did, sharp and floral against the stale air. She avoided his eyes as she placed a silver pen across the leather folder. Marcus opened the agreement and read the first page. The offer was for 12 weeks of salary, $86,400 before taxes, in exchange for his silence concerning every internal decision he had witnessed during his employment. It also required him to surrender copies of all reports, notes, and correspondence related to the company's defense contracts. Brent watched him with the satisfied expression of a man who believed he had calculated the exact price of another person's fear. Most people in the room knew Marcus as a highly paid senior executive, but they did not know the truth about his financial position. They did not know that Marcus had invested the life insurance settlement from his late wife, his Air Force savings, and nearly every dollar he owned into Liberty Shield when it was still operating from a rented warehouse outside Marietta. They did not know that the Carter Strategic Trust retained 28% of the company's voting shares, making him the largest individual shareholder. Marcus had spent years refusing a public chairman's title because he wanted to remain inside daily operations, close enough to hear the concerns that rarely reached a boardroom. That decision had allowed Brent and his allies to mistake modesty for weakness. Marcus set the pen down. "I won't sign this." A murmur moved through the auditorium. Melissa leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Think carefully. You're raising a child alone. Health insurance ends at midnight. The severance is generous." At the mention of Grace, Marcus's expression changed. Rebecca had been gone 4 years, killed when a distracted, driver crossed the center line on Interstate 75. Since that night, Marcus had measured every choice against one promise. Their daughter would never feel unprotected. He packed lunches before sunrise, learned to braid curls from online videos, attended parent conferences in between federal security briefings, and kept Rebecca's military dog tags in the top drawer beside Grace's birth certificate. Brent believed fatherhood made Marcus easy to control. In reality, it was the reason he had remained silent for too long, hoping he could repair the company without risking the stability of his home. "My daughter is exactly why I won't sign it," Marcus replied. Melissa's face hardened. She gestured to the guards. One of them, an older veteran named Daniel Price, stepped forward reluctantly. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and owed Marcus a private debt of gratitude for arranging paid leave when Daniel's wife underwent cancer treatment. "Mr. Carter," Daniel said quietly, shame visible in his eyes, "I'm supposed to escort you upstairs." Marcus nodded once. "You're doing your job, Dan. I understand." That small act of dignity caused several employees to look away. They had expected anger. What they saw instead was a man protecting the very people ordered to humiliate him. The elevator opened onto the 24th floor, where the executive offices were lined with smoked glass walls, brushed steel fixtures, and gray carpeting thick enough to silence footsteps. Marcus's corner office still carried the faint scent of cedar from the shelves Rebecca had chosen when the company first became profitable. A folded triangular flag rested in a walnut display case beside her photograph in army dress uniform, and Grace's crayon drawing of their family remained taped beneath a framed cybersecurity award. The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands in front of a house beneath an oversized American flag. Rebecca was still included, standing between Marcus and Grace with yellow lines around her head like sunlight. Marcus placed the photograph, flag case, and drawing inside the cardboard box. Daniel remained near the doorway, staring at the floor. "They've been deleting inspection records since Friday," he said under his breath. Marcus stopped. Daniel swallowed and glanced toward the hallway camera. Samuel Reed tried to save copies. Security took his laptop this morning. They told us he resigned, but I saw them walk him out through the loading dock. Samuel was a 61-year-old quality control supervisor and former Army mechanic who had reported that navigation sensors failed during freezing weather simulations. The faulty components were part of a $620 million federal contract scheduled for delivery within 6 weeks. Marcus had demanded an independent review. Brent had called the failures statistically insignificant. "Did Samuel say where he was going?" Marcus asked. "No, sir, but he looked scared." Before Marcus could answer, Grace appeared in the doorway. A young receptionist followed behind her, apologizing that the child had slipped away from the lounge. Grace's curls had begun to escape from her 2 braids, and her eyes were wet but determined. She looked at the box, then at Daniel, then at her father's disabled badge lying on the desk. "Dad, did they fire you because you told the truth?" The question struck harder than Brent's announcement. Marcus crouched so they were eye level. Grace smelled of strawberry shampoo and the cinnamon cereal she had eaten in the truck. "Sometimes people get scared when the truth threatens something they want," he said. "Does that mean we lose our house?" Her voice dropped on the last word. Marcus felt guilt move through him like cold water. She remembered the weeks after Rebecca's death, when strangers carried boxes from room to room, and relatives whispered about insurance, bills, and custody. Every unexpected change still felt like the beginning of another loss. "No, baby, we're not losing our house." "What about everybody else?" she asked, pointing toward the offices beyond the glass. "What about Mr. Reed? What about the moms and dads who work here?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no answer came. Grace reached into the box and lifted Rebecca's photograph. "Mom used to say being brave doesn't mean you aren't scared. It means you know who needs you more than your fear does." Daniel turned his face toward the window. Marcus stared at his daughter and recognized Rebecca's steadiness in the EIA child's expression. For months he had documented altered reports, unexplained payments, and canceled tests while waiting for enough evidence to force change quietly. He had told himself patience was responsible. Standing there with his daughter holding the photograph of the woman they had lost, he finally admitted that patience had become permission. Marcus carried the box through the marble lobby with Grace walking beside him, her small hand wrapped around two of his fingers. Employees stood behind glass walls pretending to work, but their faces followed him toward the revolving doors. Near reception, Brent and Melissa waited with two members of the legal department, determined to witness his departure. Brent adjusted his charcoal tie and spoke loudly enough for the surrounding staff to hear. "Once you leave the building, any attempt to access Liberty Shield systems will be treated as a criminal matter." Marcus stopped beneath the company's 30-foot American flag. Rainwater shimmered across the black stone beyond the entrance, and red brake lights reflected on the wet pavement outside. "You should be more concerned about who accessed those systems while I was still inside," he said. Brent gave a short laugh. "You're finished here, Marcus." Grace tightened her grip on her father's hand. Marcus looked down at her, then back at the executive who had just confused a job title with ownership. "No," he replied. "I was trying to give you a chance to fix this without destroying the company." He walked through the doors into the cold rain. Daniel hurried after them with an umbrella, but Marcus shook his head and continued toward his dark blue Ford F-150 parked in the visitor section, because Brent had reassigned his reserved space the week before. He placed the box on the rear seat and helped Grace climb into the passenger side. Before closing her door, he removed his wool coat and draped it around her shoulders. Then he stood in the rain beside the truck, pulled his personal phone from his pocket, and opened a contact he had not called directly in more than a year. General Evelyn Brooks, retired United States Air Force, independent chair of the Liberty Shield Board, and co-trustee of the shares Marcus had deliberately kept out of public view. She answered on the second ring. "Marcus, I heard there was a personnel action this morning." Rain ran along his forehead and into the collar of his white shirt. Through the lobby windows, Brent was still, watching, arms folded, confident that he was witnessing a defeated employee make one last desperate call. "It wasn't a personnel action," Marcus said. "It was retaliation. I have evidence of falsified military test reports, diverted funds, and obstruction of an internal safety investigation." Evelyn's tone changed immediately. "How much evidence?" "Enough to call an emergency board meeting and suspend executive authority before they erase the rest." There was a pause. Inside the truck, Grace held her mother's photograph against her chest. Evelyn asked, "What are you requesting from the board?" Marcus looked through the rain at the men and women standing silently behind Liberty Shield's glass walls. He thought of Samuel being taken through the loading dock, of the soldiers who might receive defective equipment, of the parents who could not afford to lose their paychecks, and of his daughter asking whether truth still mattered when powerful people wanted it buried. His voice remained calm when he gave the order that would change every life in that building. Confirm the evidence, protect the innocent employees, and fire every one of them. General Evelyn Brooks did not waste time asking whether Marcus was angry enough to exaggerate. She had known him since he was a 24-year-old Air Force lieutenant assigned to a cyber defense unit at Maxwell Air Force Base, and she knew that the quieter his voice became, the more serious the danger usually was. "Do not access the company network. Do not contact the accused executives directly, and do not discuss the evidence with anyone who is not protected by counsel," she instructed. "Send me the location of every physical record you preserved legally. I'll contact outside counsel and convene the audit committee." Marcus opened the driver's door, but remained standing beside the truck, rainwater dripping from his sleeves. They took Samuel Reed's laptop and walked him out through the loading dock. Evelyn was silent for half a second. "Find him, but do not pressure him. He needs independent representation." Marcus agreed, ended the call, and climbed behind the wheel. The truck smelled faintly of leather conditioner, peppermint gum, and the vanilla air freshener Grace had chosen at a gas station. For several moments, he did not start the engine. Grace sat wrapped in his wool coat, studying his face with the worried concentration of a child who had learned that adults often disguised bad news as reassurance. "Are you going to fire everybody?" she asked. Marcus placed both hands on the steering wheel. "No, I'm going to make sure the people who did wrong are held responsible. But you said every one of them. Every person who knowingly helped hurt people," he clarified. "Not the employees who were scared, not the ones who had no choice. Justice has to be careful, or it becomes another kind of cruelty." Grace nodded slowly, but her eyes remained on the lobby doors. "Are they going to come after you?" Marcus wanted to answer no. He wanted to promise that the truth functioned like a shield, that laws always protected honest men, and that powerful people accepted consequences when confronted with evidence. Rebecca would never have permitted him to offer their daughter a comforting lie. "They might try," he admitted, "but we're not alone, and we're going to do everything the right way." He started the engine, turned the heater toward Grace, and pulled away from the curb, while Brent Halpin watched from behind. The rain-streaked glass. Marcus had driven less than 2 blocks when his phone vibrated with the first sign of retaliation. A company-wide email accusing him of violating security protocols, creating a hostile workplace, and refusing to cooperate with a lawful reorganization. The email was written in the smooth, bloodless language corporations used when they wanted cruelty to resemble procedure. It stated that Marcus had been removed after repeated incidents of disruptive conduct, and warned employees against sharing confidential materials with former personnel. Attached was a photograph taken from the auditorium's security system, showing Marcus standing near the stage with his shoulders squared while 2 guards approached. The image had been cropped, so Grace, the termination papers, and the executives surrounding him could not be seen. By the time Marcus reached Grace's elementary school to collect the books she had left in her classroom, an edited video had appeared online. Someone had removed Brent's comments about defective equipment and preserved only Marcus asking whether the company called failure efficient. A local business account posted the clip under the caption, "Liberty Shield executive removed after meltdown." Within an hour, strangers were debating his temperament, his qualifications, and whether he had been hired to satisfy a diversity target. Marcus parked beneath a row of wet oak trees and stared at the comments until the words blurred together. He had spent 9 years in uniform, 21 years building secure systems, and countless nights proving himself in rooms where people assumed he belonged everywhere, except at the head of the table. Still, a 30-second video was enough for strangers to decide that a calm black man questioning corruption must have been unstable or threatening. Grace leaned toward the screen before he could turn it over. One comment called him an angry thug. Another said, Liberty Shield should be praised for removing him, before he became violent. Marcus locked the phone and placed it face down in the console. "Those people don't know you," Grace whispered. "No, they don't. Then why do they get to say things? Because this is America, and people have the freedom to speak, even when they speak without knowing the truth." Grace frowned. "That doesn't sound fair." "Freedom and fairness aren't always the same thing," Marcus said. "That's why character matters. We don't control what they say. We control what we can prove and how we behave while proving it." The explanation was meant for her, but Marcus needed to hear it himself. Anger pressed against his ribs. He imagined calling reporters, releasing every file, and destroying Brent before lunch. Instead, he remembered his father after the factory closed, shouting at television commentators, breaking a kitchen chair, and teaching his children to fear his disappointment. Marcus inhaled slowly, counted to 4 as an Air Force counselor had once taught him, and called the attorney Evelyn recommended. The attorney, Rachel Donovan, operated from a modest brick office near the federal courthouse, rather than the glass towers favored by corporate firms. She was 52, sharp-eyed and direct, with silver beginning to show in her dark hair and a Marine Corps lapel pin fastened to her black blazer in memory of her late brother. Rachel listened without interrupting, while Marcus explained the altered test results, the shell companies, the retaliation against Samuel, and his own dual role as executive and major shareholder. Grace sat at a conference table nearby, coloring an eagle in a workbook the receptionist had found. The office smelled of copier paper, black coffee, and the tomato soup someone was heating in the break room. When Marcus finished, Rachel folded her hands over a yellow legal pad. Your ownership position gives you leverage, but it does not give you permission to act recklessly, she said. You cannot order people fired by telephone. The board must investigate, preserve due process, and follow the company bylaws. If you want accountability that survives court review, we build it brick by brick. Marcus nodded. That's what I want. Rachel studied him. Is it? Because a man publicly humiliated in front of his daughter usually wants something faster. Marcus glanced toward Grace. She had drawn a small red heart beneath the eagle's wing. Fast is how they got comfortable cutting corners. We do it right. Rachel asked him to describe how he obtained each piece of evidence. Marcus had kept printed copies of reports delivered to him in the ordinary course of his work, personal notes made during meetings and emails forwarded to outside counsel months earlier under a whistleblower protocol approved by the previous board. He had not stolen files or broken into restricted systems. That distinction mattered. Rachel contacted a forensic accounting firm, prepared a preservation notice, and secured a federal employment attorney for Samuel before anyone approached him. She also instructed Marcus to document every retaliatory act, including the edited video and statements that might affect his ability to work. The hardest part won't be proving that money moved, she warned. It will be proving who knew why it moved, and who understood that failed components could endanger service members. Marcus replied, I can prove Brent knew. I sat across from him when Samuel explained the cold weather failures. Rachel's expression remained guarded. Then we find Samuel, and we make certain he tells the truth because he is ready, not because he believes he owes you. Samuel Reed lived in a narrow ranch house in Decatur with faded blue siding, a small American flag beside the porch, and a wheelchair ramp built for his wife, Denise, whose multiple sclerosis had worsened over the previous 2 years. Marcus did not go there until Rachel confirmed that Samuel's lawyer had spoken with him and that a voluntary meeting would be appropriate. When Marcus arrived near sunset, the rain had softened to a cold mist. Samuel opened the door wearing a flannel shirt, work pants, and the same steel-toed boots he had worn during his forced removal. His gray hair was flattened on one side, and deep lines framed eyes that had not slept. You shouldn't be here, he said, glancing toward the street. Their lawyers said they'd take the house if I disclosed proprietary information. Marcus kept his hands visible and made no move. To enter. I'm not asking you for documents. I came to see whether you and Denise are safe. Samuel's face tightened. Safe doesn't pay the mortgage. From inside came the mechanical hum of an oxygen concentrator and the low sound of a television news report replaying Marcus's dismissal. Denise called her husband's name, and Samuel reluctantly stepped aside. The living room was warm and crowded with family photographs, army commendations, and crocheted blankets folded across a brown fabric sofa, worn smooth at the arms. Denise sat in a powered wheelchair near a gas heater, her silver hair tied with a blue ribbon. She greeted Marcus with more composure than Samuel could manage. He told you those sensors failed at -10 degrees, she said. He told all of them. Samuel stared at the carpet. The field requirement was -25. We ran the chamber test 3 times. The guidance units froze, rebooted, and reported false coordinates. Victor ordered the test classified as inconclusive. Then Brent told me another delay would cost us the renewal. Marcus sat in a wooden chair opposite him. Why didn't you call me after they took your laptop? Samuel laughed bitterly. Because you were being walked out too. Because my wife needs medication that costs $2,300 a month before insurance. Because I'm 61. And every company says it loves veterans until a veteran becomes expensive. Denise reached across and placed 2 fingers over his clenched fist. Tell him the rest. Samuel's eyes filled with shame. He admitted he had signed a revised summary stating the failure could not be reproduced, even though he knew that was false. Brent had threatened to terminate his health coverage immediately if he refused. I put my name on it, Samuel whispered. If somebody gets hurt, that's on me. Marcus leaned forward. What you signed matters. What they did to force you matters too. You can't change yesterday, but you can decide what your name stands for tomorrow. Marcus understood Samuel's fear more deeply than the older man realized. When Marcus was 11, his father, Leon Carter, lost a machine operator job at an automotive parts plant in Birmingham. after refusing to approve a batch of defective brake components. The company described the termination as an attendance issue, and no lawyer was willing to challenge a plant that employed half the neighborhood. For 8 months, Leon applied for work in a Navy suit that grew looser as the family reduced meals. Marcus remembered the smell of powdered milk, the red final notice stamped across utility bills, and the silence at the dinner table when his mother divided one pork chop among 3 children. Leon eventually found work repairing municipal buses, but he never recovered emotionally from the humiliation. He became suspicious of kindness, ashamed of affection, and convinced that powerful institutions always won. On the night Marcus received his Air Force scholarship, Leon shook his hand. Instead of hugging him and said, "Don't ever let a company decide whether your family eats." That sentence became the foundation of Marcus's hunger for financial independence, but it also created a hidden weakness. He believed security meant never needing anyone, never exposing fear, and never placing his livelihood in another person's hands. Rebecca had challenged that belief throughout their marriage. "Independence without trust is just loneliness with a bank account," she once told him. After her death, Marcus returned to the habits she had softened. He accumulated wealth, prepared contingency plans, and carried every responsibility alone. His decision to conceal his controlling shares had begun as a way to stay close to employees, but part of him also enjoyed knowing no one could truly fire him. The humiliation in the auditorium exposed how much pride remained beneath his modest clothes and practical truck. Sitting in Samuel's small living room, Marcus realized the central question was no longer whether he could defeat Brent. It was whether he would build a company where a frightened employee never had to choose between truth and his wife's medicine. "Your legal fees are covered through the whistleblower program," Marcus told Samuel. "Your health insurance will remain active while the board investigates, and that decision will be documented so nobody can use Denise's care to buy your silence." Samuel looked up sharply. "You can guarantee that?" "The trust can fund temporary coverage if the company refuses, but Rachel is filing for protection tonight." Denise closed her eyes in relief. Samuel's shoulders began to shake. He turned away, embarrassed by his tears, until Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You're not weak because they found the person you love most and used her against you. You become responsible only if you let that fear keep controlling what you do next." While Marcus worked with counsel, Brent launched a campaign to secure his position before the emergency board meeting. He called each director individually, portraying Marcus as a wealthy founder who had become unstable after his wife's death and was attempting a hostile return to power. Victor Sloan circulated projections claiming that any delay in the sensor shipment would trigger penalties exceeding $38 million, destroy the company's federal rating, and force the elimination of 600 jobs. Melissa arranged mandatory meetings where managers warned employees that cooperation with outside investigators could violate non-disclosure agreements. Some workers deleted personal notes out of fear. Others forwarded anonymous messages to Rachel's office. One engineer reported that quality data had been moved to an off-site server controlled by a consulting company registered to Victor's brother-in-law. A payroll specialist revealed that 3 senior executives had received performance retention payments totaling $4.2 million within days of approving the reduced testing schedule. The more evidence surfaced, the more dangerous Brent became. He instructed corporate security to monitor outgoing emails and asked a private investigator to examine Marcus's finances, custody arrangements, and military record for anything that could be used publicly. When the investigator found nothing damaging, Brent's public relations consultant suggested emphasizing Marcus's anger and pattern of insubordination. The strategy depended on a familiar assumption: an assertive black man could be made to look threatening with the right camera angle and repeated language. Marcus's restraint frustrated them, so they targeted Grace indirectly. A reporter appeared outside her school and asked whether her father had frightened employees. The principal immediately moved Grace inside and called Marcus, but the child heard enough. That evening, she sat at the kitchen island in their warm brick home in Marietta, pushing macaroni and cheese around her plate while rainwater ran down the windows above the sink. The kitchen contained granite counters, oak cabinets Rebecca had painted cream, and a refrigerator covered with Grace's spelling tests, soccer schedules, and family photographs. "Did Mom die because you were at work?" Grace asked suddenly. Marcus froze. "No. A girl at school said you only care about your company. She said maybe that's why Mom was driving alone." The cruelty of the sentence left him breathless. He moved around the island, knelt beside Grace, and took both her hands. "Your mother died because another driver looked at a phone instead of the road. It was not your fault, and it was not because I didn't love her enough." Grace's chin trembled. "Are you going to choose the company over me now?" Marcus drew her against his chest. "Never. Fighting for what is right does not mean leaving you behind. From this moment on, you are part of every decision I make." The next morning, Marcus changed the strategy. Instead of spending the day in lawyers' offices, he made pancakes with Grace, braided her hair, and drove her to school personally. He walked her to the entrance despite the cameras parked across the street, keeping one hand lightly on her shoulder. When a reporter shouted whether he planned to seize control of Liberty Shield, Marcus stopped but did not approach the microphone. "My daughter is not part of this story," he said. "Do not question her, photograph her at school, or use her grief to create entertainment." His tone was firm without anger. The video spread online within an hour, and this time viewers saw an exhausted father shielding a child rather than an executive being removed by guards. Parents, veterans, and former Liberty Shield workers began sharing their own experiences. A software tester wrote that Marcus had once delayed a product launch rather than ignore a flaw that could expose military communications. A cafeteria employee remembered him paying for her son's emergency dental surgery without allowing his name to appear on the assistance form. Daniel Price confirmed publicly that Marcus had remained calm during the dismissal and that the guards had never considered him dangerous. Each testimony weakened Brent's narrative, but Marcus refused invitations to appear on television. "This is not a popularity contest," he told Rachel. "It's an evidence problem." Rachel agreed, but warned that public pressure might prevent documents from disappearing. They released one carefully reviewed statement confirming that Marcus had requested an independent investigation into safety and financial concerns. No accusations were named beyond what filings could support. The restraint encouraged additional witnesses. A procurement analyst named Laura Kim came forward with invoices showing that Victor's consulting companies charged Liberty Shield $9,700 per day for risk assessments that had never been performed. A young black engineer, Darius Cole, admitted Melissa had instructed him to rewrite meeting notes, so Samuel's warnings appeared uncertain. Darius was 26, recently married and expecting his first child. He arrived at Rachel's office wearing a wrinkled gray suit and carried no documents because he feared being accused of theft. "I thought I was protecting my family," he said. "Now I can't sleep because somebody else's family might be inside a vehicle using those sensors." Marcus did not absolve him cheaply. "You made a bad choice," he said, "but telling the truth now gives us a chance to stop the harm. Accountability does not mean you are beyond redemption." That afternoon, Grace's maternal grandparents arrived from Columbus, Georgia, without warning. Colonel Thomas Whitaker, retired from the United States Army, still wore his gray hair in a regulation cut and carried himself as though every doorway required inspection. His wife, Eleanor, was softer in manner but equally protective of their granddaughter. They found Marcus at the dining room table, surrounded by binders, financial summaries, and a yellow notebook filled with Grace's homework reminders. Thomas did not sit down. "You need to resign your board rights, sell the shares, and take Grace somewhere quiet," he said. "Rebecca is gone. That child has one parent left." Marcus closed the binder. "Selling now would put the company in Brent's hands and leave soldiers dependent on equipment we know may fail. You are not in uniform anymore. Neither are you, Colonel. Would that stop you from speaking if you knew troops were being put at risk?" Thomas's jaw tightened. Their relationship had never fully recovered after Rebecca's death. Thomas privately blamed Marcus for encouraging his daughter's demanding career, while Marcus believed Thomas used military discipline to avoid grieving. Eleanor led Grace upstairs before the argument deepened. Thomas lowered his voice. "I buried my daughter. I will not bury my granddaughter because two proud men are fighting over a corporation." Marcus stood, anger rising. but he forced himself to hear the fear beneath the accusation. "I'm not asking Grace to carry this fight. She already is. Her face is online. Reporters are outside her school." The words landed because they were true. Marcus looked toward the staircase where Grace's red backpack rested against the wall. "What would you have me teach her?" he asked. "That we walk away when doing right becomes dangerous? That her mother's values were only convenient words?" Thomas stared at Rebecca's framed portrait on the mantel. For the first time, his expression softened. "I would teach her that duty begins with the people at your table." Marcus nodded. "Then help me protect the table while I finish the duty." The request surprised them both. Marcus had not asked Thomas for help in 4 years. After a long silence, the older man sat down and studied the documents. "What do you need?" "Take Grace to school for the next 2 days. Keep her away from cameras. And tell her stories about her mother that don't end with the accident." Thomas's eyes became wet, though his voice remained steady. "I can do that." The audit committee met that evening through a secure conference system managed by outside counsel. Marcus joined from Rachel's office with Evelyn Brooks, 3 independent directors, forensic accountant Naomi Patel, and federal contracting specialist James Hollis. The monitors cast pale light across the dark room, and cardboard cups of coffee accumulated beside. Stacks of numbered exhibits. Naomi explained that $14.8 million had moved through 6 consulting entities over 18 months. 4 entities were linked to relatives or former business partners of Victor, Brent, and Melissa. The payments alone did not establish criminal intent, but the absence of deliverables, identical invoice language and transfers occurring immediately after reduced testing approvals, created a strong pattern. Hollis warned that knowingly delivering components that failed. Contract specifications could expose Liberty Shield to suspension from federal contracting, civil penalties, and potential criminal referral. "The government's first concern will be whether the company concealed risk to personnel," he said. "The second will be whether current leadership can preserve evidence and correct the problem." One director, venture capitalist Leonard Pike, argued that suspending Brent before the quarterly announcement might collapse the share price. "We're talking about thousands of retirement accounts," he said. "A public scandal could erase hundreds of millions in value." Marcus looked directly into the camera. "And a field failure could erase somebody's son or daughter." Leonard replied that emotion could not dictate corporate decisions. Evelyn intervened. "This is not emotion. It is the company's contractual obligation." Marcus presented Samuel's original test log, which had been printed and distributed during a meeting he attended. The document showed 3 failures below -10 degrees and contained Brent's handwritten note. "Ship date cannot move. Reclassify as environmental anomaly." Rachel confirmed the copy had been retained lawfully. Silence followed. Leonard removed his glasses. "That note is a problem." "It's more than a problem," Marcus said. "It proves the chief executive understood the failure before authorizing the revised report. The committee voted to preserve all servers, restrict the 3 executives' ability to transfer funds, and authorize interviews with witnesses. A final decision on suspensions would occur after 1 additional document review the next morning. Marcus wanted immediate removal, but Rachel placed a hand over the microphone and reminded him that durable justice required procedure. He accepted the delay, even as every instinct warned him that Brent would use the remaining hours to escape. The warning proved justified. At 2:40 in the morning, Naomi's forensic team detected an attempt to move $3.6 million from a Liberty Shield reserve account into a Cayman Islands entity listed as an international licensing partner. The bank's automated fraud controls paused the transaction because Evelyn had already filed a temporary dual authorization requirement. Minutes later, Victor Sloan entered the company building using an emergency credential that should have been disabled. Daniel Price, assigned to the overnight desk, saw the alert and contacted Evelyn rather than confronting Victor alone. Atlanta police arrived to find Victor in the finance suite feeding paper files into an industrial shredder. He claimed he was preparing documents for routine disposal, but the destruction violated the legal preservation notice delivered hours earlier. Several partially shredded invoices were recovered. Brent immediately denied authorizing Victor's actions, while Melissa claimed she had been unaware of any financial misconduct. Their alliance began collapsing under the pressure each had once, directed at subordinates. Rachel called Marcus at 3:12 a.m. He was awake on the living room sofa, unable to sleep, with Rebecca's folded flag on the coffee table and the television muted. Grace had left a blanket over him before going upstairs. The transfer was blocked, Rachel said. Victor has counsel and is not speaking. Do not celebrate. We still need to establish the full chain. Marcus rubbed his eyes. What happens to the employees if the federal contract is frozen? Payroll is funded for approximately 11 weeks at current levels. Longer if executive bonuses and discretionary expansion are suspended. Marcus walked to the kitchen and looked at the family calendar. Grace's school concert was circled in red for Friday night. Beside it, she had written, "Dad promised. Prepare a personal credit facility against my shares," he said. Up to $25 million for payroll protection, but only if the board approves independent control. Rachel paused. That is a significant personal exposure. So is asking 3,000 families to trust that rich people will eventually resolve their argument. He knew the trust could absorb the loss, but the decision still meant placing part of Grace's inheritance at risk. For the first time, he did not make the choice alone. He went upstairs, woke her gently, and explained in simple terms that he wanted to use some of their money to protect workers if the company temporarily could not pay them. Grace listened sleepily, her curls spread across the pillow. Will we still have enough? More than enough. Then why are you asking me? Because the money is part of your future, too. Grace considered this and pulled the blanket to her chin. Mom would say people are our future. Marcus smiled despite the hour. Yes, she would. By sunrise, employees began gathering outside Liberty Shield's headquarters. They were not protesting Marcus or defending Brent. They were demanding answers. Engineers stood beside custodians, cafeteria. Workers, administrative assistants, and former employees carrying handmade signs that read, "Safety is not insubordination, and we build for those who serve." Several wore military jackets over work clothes. Samuel arrived with Denise in her wheelchair, accompanied by his attorney. He looked frightened, but no longer ashamed. Local news crews positioned cameras along the sidewalk, while police created a narrow path to the entrance. Marcus remained across the street inside Rachel's vehicle, unwilling to turn the employees' fear into a stage for his return. Grace sat beside him on her way to school, her lunchbox on her knees. "They came because of you," she said. Marcus shook his head. "They came because they finally believe they can speak without standing alone." Samuel moved toward a microphone. His voice trembled at first as he identified himself and described his 37 years working in military maintenance and quality assurance. He admitted signing the revised report under threat, then explained the sensor failures and apologized to the workers whose jobs might be endangered by the disclosure. "I serve this country because I believed a man's word should mean something," he said. "Yesterday I was ashamed of mine. Today I'm correcting it." Denise watched with tears on her face. Darius and Laura joined him, each acknowledging their own fear and choices. The gathering changed the story from one powerful shareholder seeking revenge into a group of ordinary workers demanding integrity. Marcus felt a pressure behind his eyes. He had spent years believing leadership meant carrying the heaviest burden privately. Samuel was showing him another form of leadership, admitting weakness publicly so others could find courage. Grace reached over and squeezed his hand. "You should go stand with them." Marcus looked at the time. "You have school. Grandpa is meeting us there." He hesitated, remembering Thomas's warning that duty began with the people at his table. Grace seemed to read the conflict. "Standing with them doesn't mean you're leaving me," she said. "It means you'll come home after." Marcus leaned across the console and kissed her forehead. "Always." Marcus crossed Peachtree Street without security, an umbrella or a prepared statement. The crowd noticed him gradually, conversations fading as workers turned. Some applauded, but he raised one hand and asked them to stop. He stood beside Samuel rather than in front of him. Cameras pushed closer. "This company was built by people who believed American technology should protect American lives," Marcus said. "It was not built so executives could enrich their relatives, silence veterans, or force parents to choose between a paycheck and their conscience." He confirmed that the board had opened an independent investigation and that he had offered personal financial backing to preserve payroll if necessary. He also cautioned against condemning every manager before the evidence was reviewed. A reporter, shouted. "Did you make a call ordering the entire executive team fired?" Marcus looked toward the building where Brent stood behind a window on the 28th floor. "I requested the removal of every person proven to have participated knowingly in fraud, retaliation, or the concealment of safety failures," he answered. "But no worker will be sacrificed to satisfy my anger. We will separate fear from corruption, mistakes from deliberate harm, and evidence from rumor." Another reporter asked whether he intended to reclaim the CEO position. "My title is not the emergency," Marcus said. "The equipment, the employees, and the truth are the emergency." Inside, Brent watched the broadcast and understood that his final defense, portraying Marcus as a humiliated man seeking revenge, was disappearing. At 8:05, Evelyn called Marcus and instructed him to enter through the main doors for the emergency session. The board had completed its initial review. Brent, Melissa, and Victor would each be given an opportunity to respond before the suspension vote. Marcus turned to Samuel. "Are you ready to testify?" Samuel looked at Denise, then at the American flag above the entrance. "No," he admitted, "but I'm going anyway." Marcus nodded. That's usually what courage looks like. Before entering, Marcus called Thomas to confirm Grace had reached school safely. The retired colonel answered from the parking lot and said she had gone inside holding his hand. "She made me promise not to start a fight with the reporters," Thomas added. Marcus allowed himself a brief laugh. "Smart girl." Thomas's voice became serious. "Rebecca would be proud of what you're doing." Marcus looked down at the rain-darkened pavement. In 4 years, Thomas had never offered those words. "I don't know whether I'm doing it right." "Neither did she," Thomas replied. "She was afraid every time she deployed. She just refused to let fear make the decision." The statement loosened something Marcus had carried since the funeral, the belief that honoring Rebecca required him to imitate her certainty. She had never been certain. She had simply remained faithful to her values, while afraid. Marcus thanked Thomas and ended the call. As he approached the revolving doors, Daniel Price stepped forward in his security uniform. The same guard who had been ordered to escort him out now held the door open. "The board is waiting upstairs, sir." Marcus looked into the lobby where employees lined both sides of the marble floor. Some appeared hopeful. Others looked terrified about what an investigation might mean for their mortgages, medical bills, and children. Marcus understood that a dramatic victory could still become a human disaster if handled without discipline. He placed one hand against the cardboard box Daniel had returned to him. Rebecca's photograph remained inside beside Grace's drawing and the folded flag. He did not carry the box as evidence of humiliation anymore. It reminded him why authority had to be exercised with restraint. He entered the elevator with Rachel, Evelyn, Samuel, and his attorney. As the doors closed, Samuel whispered, "What if they ask why I waited?" Marcus replied, "Tell them the truth. You were scared. Then tell them why you stopped being scared." The elevator began climbing toward the 28th floor, where the men and women who believed they had ended Marcus Carter's career were preparing to discover that dismissing a job title had never removed his responsibility, his ownership, or his voice. The emergency boardroom occupied the eastern corner of Liberty Shield's 28th floor, enclosed by walls of soundproof glass that looked down over Atlanta's wet streets and the gray ribbons of traffic moving beneath low clouds. A 20-foot walnut table dominated the room, its surface polished so perfectly that the recessed ceiling lights appeared as pale circles beneath every leather chair. The American flag stood behind the chairperson's seat, beside the blue Liberty Shield banner, while a bronze plaque on the wall displayed the company's original promise, technology in service of freedom. Marcus had helped choose those words 19 years earlier, when the company consisted of 12 employees, 2 borrowed servers, and a government contract worth less than $400,000. Now the sentence looked almost accusatory. Brent Halpern sat at the opposite end of the table with 2 attorneys, his charcoal suit still immaculate despite the chaos. Downstairs, Melissa Crane wore a pearl necklace and kept both hands folded over a yellow notebook, although Marcus noticed that she had written nothing. Victor Sloan was not present in person. He appeared on a wall-mounted monitor from his lawyer's office, pale and unshaven beneath harsh fluorescent lighting. General Evelyn Brooks opened the session at 9:02 and reminded every participant that the meeting was being recorded. that retaliation against witnesses was prohibited, and that no conclusion would be reached without reviewing the evidence. Brent immediately objected to Marcus's presence, arguing that a terminated employee had no standing in an internal personnel matter. Evelyn allowed him to finish before sliding a certified ownership register across the table. "Mr. Carter is not here as an employee," she said. "He is here as the authorized representative of the Carter Strategic Trust, which controls 28% of Liberty Shield's voting shares. He is also the shareholder who formally requested this investigation." Brent stared at the document. For the first time since the auditorium, his composure broke. He looked from Marcus to the directors as though waiting for someone to reveal the mistake. 28%? He repeated. Marcus met his gaze without satisfaction. "You never asked who kept the company alive during its first 3 years." Brent turned toward Leonard Pike. "You knew?" Leonard shook his head slowly. Only Evelyn, outside counsel, and the Trust's administrators had known the full structure. Marcus had chosen privacy because he wanted engineers and technicians to speak to him honestly, rather than treat every conversation as an audience with an owner. Brent interpreted the silence differently. "This is a setup," he said. He concealed his influence, embedded himself in management, and waited for an opportunity to seize control. Rachel Donovan opened a binder. Mr. Carter disclosed every required interest to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Contracting Office, and the board's legal counsel. Your failure to understand the ownership structure does not make it a conspiracy. Evelyn ordered the forensic presentation to begin. Naomi Patel displayed bank records, invoices, and timelines across 3 screens. Payment after payment flowed from Liberty Shield into consulting companies connected to relatives of the accused executives. The money alone could have been defended as negligent oversight. What could not be explained so easily were the dates. Each major transfer occurred within 72 hours of a decision to reduce testing, suppress a failure report, or eliminate an employee who objected. Brent watched the evidence with his lips pressed into a narrow line. Melissa's fingers began rubbing the edge of her wedding band. Victor's lawyer repeatedly instructed him not to answer. Marcus felt anger rise each time a new document appeared, but he kept his attention on the workers represented by those numbers. Engineers who had been told there was no budget for overtime, families whose health coverage had been threatened, and soldiers who would never know that the people responsible for their safety had treated inspection standards as obstacles to executive bonuses. Samuel Reed entered the room at 10:18, accompanied by Denise, his attorney, and a medical aide. Evelyn had offered to arrange a private video statement because of Denise's condition, but Samuel insisted on appearing in person. His flannel shirt had been replaced by a dark blue suit that pulled slightly across his shoulders, and he wore his Army service pin above the breast pocket. Denise's wheelchair moved quietly over the thick carpet until she was positioned behind him near the wall. Samuel remained standing, one hand gripping the back of an empty chair. Outside counsel asked him to describe the cold weather tests without speculation or emotion. He explained that the guidance sensors were required to remain operational at temperatures as low as -25 degrees Fahrenheit, a standard based on deployment environments in Alaska, Northern Europe, and high-altitude regions. During 3 separate chamber tests, the units rebooted, generated false coordinates, and lost communication with the central navigation system. Samuel reported each failure through the approved process and recommended a 4 to 6 week redesign. Naomi displayed his original test log, complete with timestamps, serial numbers, and photographs of the frozen circuit housings. Then she displayed the revised report signed 6 days later, stating that the errors were caused by improper laboratory calibration and could not be reproduced. "Did you believe that statement was true when you signed it?" Rachel asked. Samuel lowered his eyes. "No." Brent's attorney leaned forward. "So you knowingly falsified a corporate record?" Samuel looked at Denise before answering. "Yes." A murmur moved around the table. "Why?" "Because Mr. Halpern told me the contract could not tolerate another delay. Ms. Crane said my position would be eliminated immediately and that my medical insurance would end at midnight. My wife's treatment costs more than $2,000 a month before coverage." Melissa interrupted. "I explained standard benefits policy. I never threatened his wife." Samuel turned toward her. You placed Denise's medication list on the table while you explained it. The room became completely still. Melissa's face lost color. Samuel continued, his voice rough but clear. I signed because I was afraid. I told myself another team would catch the defect. I told myself the units might never be used in extreme cold. Mostly I told myself my wife needed me more than strangers did. He took a breath and straightened his shoulders. That was cowardice. But the people in this room created a system that rewarded cowardice and punished honesty. Brent called the accusation emotional and self-serving. Samuel's attorney produced an audio recording made automatically by Samuel's phone during a quality meeting. The state's consent rules and the meeting's corporate recording notice made it potentially admissible, though Rachel cautioned that final legal determinations would come later. The speakers filled the boardroom with Brent's unmistakable voice. Reclassify the failures. We are not losing $600 million because an old mechanic thinks every test is sacred. Another voice, Victor's, asked whether the Department of Defense would receive the raw data. Brent replied, they receive the conclusion, we certify. The recording ended. Nobody moved. Marcus remembered Samuel's shame in the small Decatur living room and Grace asking what would happen to all the other mothers and fathers. He realized that the company's greatest failure was not a frozen sensor. It was the deliberate construction of fear, strong enough to make decent people betray their own judgment. Darius Cole and Laura Kim testified next, providing the chain that connected intimidation to financial benefit. Darius described being summoned to Melissa's office 2 days after Samuel's warning, where he was instructed to replace the words "repeated system failure" with "environmental inconsistency" in the official minutes. He admitted that he obeyed because Melissa reminded him that his wife was pregnant. His probationary period had not ended, and his health insurance would not become portable for another 60 days. Laura explained that Victor's department approved invoices from 6 consulting firms without competitive bids or evidence of completed work. When she questioned one payment, Victor instructed her to label it a national security expense, knowing the designation would discourage routine review. She produced no stolen documents. Instead, Naomi's team located the relevant files through the preserved company servers after Laura identified the accounting codes. By noon, the pattern was no longer ambiguous. Brent directed operational concealment. Melissa weaponized employment and health benefits to secure compliance. And Victor transformed the savings and contract bonuses into private financial gain. Yet the investigation also revealed managers who had acted under direct threats, employees who had objected quietly, and technicians who never knew the results had been altered. Leonard Pike asked the question Marcus knew would determine whether the board sought justice or panic. How many people participated at any level? Naomi answered that 43 names appeared in communications, but only 9 individuals currently showed evidence of knowing both that the data was false and that the concealment could endanger end users. Brent seized on the number. He argued that Marcus's demand to fire every one of them proved the investigation was revenge disguised as governance. He wants a purge, Brent said. He wants to walk back into this building as a conquering hero and punish anyone who supported the reorganization. Evelyn looked toward Marcus. You may respond. Marcus rose slowly. Rain traced thin lines down the glass behind him, and far below, employees still gathered along the sidewalk. When I made that call, I was angry, he admitted. I had been humiliated in front of my daughter. A veteran had been threatened through his wife's illness, and equipment bearing our name was being shipped despite known failures. I said, fire every one of them. And I meant every person who knowingly chose money over lives and used fear to make others participate. He looked at Darius, whose hands were clasped tightly in his lap. I did not mean every frightened employee who made one wrong decision and came forward before someone was hurt. I will not pretend all choices are equal. A young engineer changing one line under threat is not the same as a CEO creating the threat, and accountability that ignores that difference is not justice. Brent gave a humorless laugh. You expect us to believe this sudden mercy? Marcus stepped closer to the table. Mercy does not erase consequences. Darius will face review. Samuel will have to explain his signature to federal investigators. But neither man built the machine that trapped them. You did. He pointed toward the company motto on the wall. We sell protection to the United States government while our own employees are afraid to tell the truth. That ends today, whether I ever hold another title here or not. Brent's final defense arrived in the form of a presentation titled Market Continuity Plan. He proposed that the board retain him temporarily, quietly replace the defective sensors, and negotiate with federal officials before making any public disclosure. Removing the executive team immediately, he warned, could reduce the company's value by 40%, trigger loan defaults, and force mass layoffs. His attorneys described the plan as responsible containment. Marcus recognized it as the same logic that had permitted every previous compromise: protect the institution's appearance first and repair its character only if convenient. Evelyn asked whether Brent intended to disclose that the test report had been deliberately falsified. He avoided the word deliberately and spoke about process inconsistencies. She asked again, "Would you tell the Department of Defense that you knew the equipment failed and approved a report stating otherwise?" Brent stared at the polished table. "I would tell them what preserves the contract and the jobs dependent upon it." Marcus felt his last uncertainty disappear. The issue was not whether Brent understood the damage. He understood, and would make the same choice again. Evelyn called for a brief recess before the vote. Marcus left the boardroom and found Grace sitting in a smaller conference room with Thomas and Eleanor. Her school had dismissed early after another reporter attempted to enter the campus, and her grandparents had brought her to the secured building rather than take her home alone. Grace stood when Marcus entered. "Did you win?" she asked. "This isn't a game, sweetheart." "Did they tell the truth?" "Some did. Some are still hiding." She noticed the tension in his face and led him toward the window, away from the adults. "Are you going to fire the scared people too?" Marcus shook his head. "No. Even the ones who made mistakes? They will have consequences, but I won't treat them like the people who planned it." Grace looked relieved, then reached into her backpack and handed him a folded sheet of notebook paper. In purple pencil, she had written, "Mom said, justice protects people. Revenge only hurts them again." Beneath the sentence, she had drawn 3 figures holding hands under a crooked American flag. Marcus pressed his lips together, but tears filled his eyes before he could stop them. Grace had seen him cry only once, at Rebecca's funeral, and even then, he had turned away. This time, he knelt in front of her and allowed the grief, fear, and exhaustion to show. "I thought being strong meant never letting you see me scared," he said. "But I am scared. I'm scared of losing what we built. I'm scared people will get hurt. And I'm scared I'll become so angry that I forget why I started." Grace placed both hands on his face. "Then remember us." Marcus closed his eyes. He understood that his daughter was not asking him to choose family instead of duty. She was asking him to let family define how he performed it. When the board secretary called everyone back, Marcus carried the note into the meeting and placed it beside his voting papers. At 1:46 p.m., Evelyn called the roll. The board voted unanimously to terminate Brent Halpern for cause, suspend Melissa Crane pending final legal review, and terminate Victor Sloan for financial misconduct and destruction of evidence. A second vote referred the financial records and falsified test reports to the Department of Justice and the appropriate defense contracting authorities. A third authorized immediate suspension of the sensor shipment, full retesting by an independent laboratory, and payroll protection funded through existing reserves and Marcus's proposed credit facility if required. When the result was announced, Brent remained motionless for several seconds, as though authority had become so central to his identity that he could not understand himself without it. Then he turned toward Marcus. "You just destroyed this company to prove a point." Marcus stood across from him, no guards between them now. "No, you nearly destroyed it because you believed protecting your position was the same as protecting the company." Brent's voice rose. "Thousands of people may lose money because of you. People can recover money. Families cannot recover a soldier who trusted equipment we knew was defective." Melissa began crying quietly, insisting she had only followed Brent's directives. Marcus did not humiliate her, but neither did he. "Excuse her. You looked employees in the eye, learned what they feared most, and used it against them," he said. You will have the opportunity to explain every decision with counsel present. That is more fairness than you gave them. Security entered to collect credentials, but Marcus instructed Daniel to treat all three executives with dignity and allow them to gather personal items under supervision. Daniel understood the significance. The same procedure used to degrade Marcus would not be, used as revenge. As Brent was escorted toward the door, he looked back and asked, "What makes you think you'll be any different once you sit in this chair?" Marcus glanced at Grace's note beside the American flag. "Because my daughter will know where to find me if I forget." Evelyn then announced that Marcus would serve as interim chief executive only until employees, federal clients, and outside investigators were protected. Permanent leadership would be decided after the crisis. Through the glass walls, word of the vote moved across the building. Workers embraced, some cried, and others simply sat at their desks, absorbing the fact that speaking truth had not ended their careers. Samuel covered his face as Denise held his hand. Darius called his pregnant wife. Marcus did not celebrate. He walked into the hallway, found Grace waiting between her grandparents, and opened his arms. She ran to him, and he held her tightly enough to feel her heart against his chest. "Did you do what Mom would have done?" she whispered. Marcus looked at Rebecca's father, at the workers emerging from offices, and at the flag hanging over the lobby 28 floors below. "I did what you reminded me she taught us," he answered. If this story of a humble single dad proving everyone wrong has you watching until the end, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more emotional stories of sacrifice, hidden strength, and unforgettable twists. Now let's get back to the video. The first 72 hours of Marcus Carter's return to Liberty Shield Technologies were nothing like the victory imagined by the people gathered outside the building. There was no champagne, no triumphant speech, and no photograph of Marcus sitting behind Brent Halpern's old desk. The executive floor had been sealed for forensic review. Federal contracting officers were requesting records, and the Department of Defense had temporarily paused the $620 million sensor contract. Marcus worked from a small conference room on the 17th floor, using a borrowed laptop while engineers, lawyers, and employee representatives moved constantly through the glass door. The room smelled of printer toner, cold pizza, and coffee that had remained on the burner too long. His navy suit jacket hung over the back of a chair, his sleeves were rolled to his forearms, and a yellow legal pad beside him contained 2 lists written in block letters: people to protect and problems to fix. His first order prohibited retaliation against anyone who cooperated with investigators. His second restored health coverage for Samuel Reed and 11 other employees who had been dismissed during the previous 6 months. His third froze executive bonuses and redirected $6.3 million into payroll reserves, ensuring that hourly workers would continue receiving checks, even if the contract suspension lasted longer than expected. Marcus refused to restore every terminated employee automatically. Each case was reviewed by outside counsel and an independent labor panel so that personal loyalty would not replace evidence. 7 employees were reinstated within 2 weeks, 4 received settlements, and 3 dismissals were upheld because the investigation showed unrelated misconduct. That careful approach frustrated people who wanted immediate heroes and villains. But Marcus had promised Grace that justice would distinguish deliberate corruption from frightened mistakes. Samuel returned to the building not as an executive, but as a protected witness and temporary advisor to the independent safety team. On his first morning back, he stood outside the environmental testing chamber and stared through the reinforced window at a new set of sensors being exposed to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. The machinery hummed beneath bright industrial lights, and frost spread across the metal housings like white veins. Every unit remained operational through 6 consecutive tests. Samuel pressed one hand against the glass and began crying without sound. Marcus stood beside him, but did not interrupt. "I kept thinking about some kid in uniform trusting what we signed," Samuel finally said. "My son was 20 when he deployed. I should have remembered every one of those soldiers is somebody's child." Marcus answered, "You remembered before the equipment left the warehouse. That matters." Samuel wiped his face with the back of his hand. "It doesn't erase what I signed." "No," Marcus said, "but responsibility is not supposed to erase the past. It is supposed to change what happens next." The company voluntarily disclosed the falsified reports, accepted federal oversight, and paid for the replacement of every affected component before delivery. The decision cost Liberty Shield $41 million in redesign, penalties, and delayed revenue. Its stock price fell 23% in 9 days. Business commentators called Marcus reckless, while investors demanded layoffs to protect quarterly earnings. He refused. Instead, the company sold an unused office property, canceled a luxury executive retreat in Hawaii, and eliminated private aircraft privileges that had cost nearly $4 million a year. A janitor should not lose health insurance so a vice president can fly alone, Marcus told the board. By the end of the 3rd month, the corrected censor passed independent military certification, the contract suspension was lifted, and federal officials publicly credited Liberty Shield's new leadership for cooperating rather than concealing the misconduct. The company had suffered financially, but not one soldier received the defective equipment, and not one hourly worker missed a paycheck. 6 months after the rainy morning when Marcus carried his belongings through the lobby, employees returned to the same auditorium for another company-wide meeting. The room looked almost unchanged. The same walnut stage, the same black vinyl chairs, and the same American and Georgia flags beneath the white ceiling lights. Yet the atmosphere was different. The glass doors remained open, no security guards blocked the aisles, and the first rows were reserved not for executives, but for technicians, custodians, cafeteria employees, and veterans who had worked through the investigation. Grace sat beside Thomas and Eleanor, wearing a blue dress, polished black shoes, and Rebecca's small flag-shaped pin above her heart. Marcus entered without music or introduction, dressed in a dark, gray suit and the blue tie Grace had selected that morning. He paused beside the chair where his daughter had once watched him be publicly dismissed, then stepped onto the stage carrying the same cardboard box. A ripple of confusion moved through the audience. Marcus placed it on the podium and removed each object slowly. Rebecca's photograph, the folded flag, Grace's family drawing, and the disabled employee badge Brent had ordered security to take from him. 6 months ago, this box was meant to tell me I no longer belonged here, he began. But a company does not belong to the person holding the highest title. It belongs to the people whose labor gives the title meaning. He announced that the board had unanimously appointed him permanent chief executive, but he refused the compensation package originally attached to the position. His base salary would be capped at 15 times the company's lowest full-time wage until the federal monitors completed their work, and executive bonuses would depend equally on financial performance, safety results, and employee retention standards. Marcus then introduced the Rebecca Carter Integrity and Service Initiative, funded with $12 million from recovered assets, canceled executive bonuses, and a personal contribution from the Carter Strategic Trust. The initiative would provide technical training to veterans, widowed parents, and workers from low-income neighborhoods, subsidized childcare for single parents, independent legal support for whistleblowers, and emergency medical coverage, so no supervisor could again use a spouse's illness as leverage. Samuel was appointed Director of Product Integrity, a role that reported directly to an independent board committee rather than the CEO. Darius retained his engineering position after completing ethics training and accepting a formal disciplinary notice, while Laura Kim became Deputy Director of Procurement Oversight. Marcus did not present their futures as rewards for betrayal or excuses for their mistakes. He explained that redemption required truth, consequence, and sustained good conduct. Then he invited Daniel Price to the stage. The security guard approached nervously, still wearing the same dark uniform he had worn during Marcus's dismissal. Marcus handed him a plaque, recognizing his refusal to abuse authority when ordered to escort a colleague from the building. Daniel treated me with dignity on a day when dignity was being used as a weapon, Marcus said. Character is often revealed not by whether we obey an instruction, but by how much humanity we preserve while carrying it out. Daniel lowered his head, overcome with emotion, and the employees rose in a standing ovation. Marcus then called Grace forward. She walked onto the stage and looked uncertainly at the hundreds of faces. Marcus unfolded the note she had given him before the board vote and read her words aloud. Justice protects people. Revenge only hurts them again. He framed the note beside the company's original mission statement. "This is the standard by which you may judge me," he told the workers. "Not because my daughter is perfect, but because she was brave enough to remind a powerful man that power without compassion is simply another form of fear." Grace embraced him beneath the American flag, and for the first time since Rebecca's funeral, Marcus allowed an entire room to see him cry. The changes inside Liberty Shield also forced Marcus to rebuild the part of his life no board could repair. He stopped treating fatherhood as another operation to manage and began giving Grace what she had needed since her mother's death. Not constant protection from sadness, but permission to experience it beside him. Every Wednesday evening became family dinner night, protected from meetings unless a genuine emergency threatened human safety. Marcus learned to leave his phone in a kitchen drawer while Grace described spelling tests, soccer practice, and the confusing alliances of fifth-grade friendships. Thomas and Eleanor joined them twice a month, and the old tension between Marcus and his father-in-law slowly softened into mutual respect. Thomas began telling Grace about Rebecca as a stubborn teenager who once organized an entire neighborhood to repair a veteran's roof, not only as the officer whose folded flag sat inside a glass case. Eleanor brought Rebecca's handwritten recipe book, and the family spent a Saturday covering the kitchen in flour while attempting her buttermilk biscuits. The first batch burned. The second remained raw in the center. By the third, Grace was laughing so hard she had to sit on the floor, and Marcus realized the house had not sounded that alive in 4 years. He also attended counseling through a veterans family program, where he finally spoke about his father's bitterness, his terror after Rebecca's accident, and the pride that had convinced him asking for help would make him less dependable. Leon Carter, now 71 and living in Birmingham, visited after seeing the Liberty Shield hearings on television. Father and son sat on the back porch beneath a clear winter sky, drinking coffee, while Grace chased a soccer ball across the yard. Leon admitted that losing the factory job had made him feel useless, and that he had punished his family for a humiliation they had not caused. "I taught you never to let a company decide whether your family eats," he said. "But I also taught you a man has to carry everything alone. I was wrong about that." Marcus looked toward Grace, who had fallen in the wet grass and was waving away her grandfather's concern as she stood. "I almost taught her the same thing," he replied. Leon placed a weathered hand on his son's shoulder, an affectionate gesture he had withheld for decades. "Then you stopped the lesson before it became her life." A year after the investigation, the Department of Justice announced criminal charges against Victor for wire fraud, obstruction, and attempted transfer of corporate funds. Brent entered a plea agreement involving false statements and conspiracy to conceal contract deficiencies, while Melissa cooperated with investigators and accepted professional sanctions that prevented her from holding a senior human resources role for several years. Marcus made no public statement celebrating their punishment. When a reporter asked whether he felt vindicated, he replied that accountability belonged to the courts and that his responsibility was preventing the system from being rebuilt under different names. Liberty Shield stock eventually recovered, but Marcus measured success differently. Workplace safety reports increased by 340% during the first year, not because misconduct had multiplied, but because employees finally trusted the reporting process. Staff turnover fell by nearly half. The veteran training program graduated its first 186 participants, including 53 single parents, and 91% found full-time employment within 3 months. Samuel and Denise paid off the remaining balance on their home. Darius welcomed a baby girl and named Marcus neither godfather nor honorary uncle, refusing to turn gratitude into obligation. Instead, he asked Marcus to speak at the child's future school career day. That ordinary request meant more to Marcus than any corporate award. 3 years later, sunlight replaced the rain in the windows of Liberty Shield's auditorium as Grace Carter, now 13, stood behind the walnut podium to present the annual Rebecca Carter Service Scholarship. She had grown taller, but her eyes retained the same steady expression that had stopped her father outside his empty office. In the front row sat a 19-year-old recipient named Maya Thompson, the daughter of a cafeteria worker who had nearly lost her job during Brent's restructuring. Maya had graduated at the top of her high school class and planned to study cybersecurity at Georgia Tech before serving in the Air Force. Grace explained that the scholarship was not charity and did not require its recipients to feel indebted. "It is an investment in people who already have courage," she said, glancing toward Marcus. "Sometimes they just need someone powerful enough to open a door and humble enough to move out of the way." Marcus sat between Thomas and Leon in the final row, rather than on the stage. The company had trained more than 900 veterans and single parents, provided emergency medical assistance to hundreds of families, and established safety partnerships with 3 other defense manufacturers. Yet the greatest evidence of transformation sat beside him. 2 aging men who had once hidden grief behind authority now applauded openly as their granddaughter honored the woman all 3 of them had loved. After the ceremony, Grace found Marcus standing near the glass doors where she had watched him carry the cardboard box years earlier. "Do you ever wish they hadn't fired you?" she asked. Marcus looked across the lobby at workers talking with scholarship families beneath the enormous American flag. "That day hurt," he said, "but losing the position forced me to decide what kind of man I would be without it." Grace smiled. "You still made the call." "I did. And you fired every one of them." Marcus shook his head gently. "I removed the people who proved they would keep hurting others, but your note stopped me from becoming one of them." He placed an arm around her shoulders, and together they walked through the doors into the warm Georgia afternoon. Marcus had once believed power meant becoming too wealthy to be threatened, too prepared to be surprised, and too independent to be abandoned. He now understood that real strength was the courage to protect people without possessing them, correct injustice without enjoying humiliation, and return home without pretending the battle had left no wounds. A job could be taken in a single meeting. A reputation could be damaged by an edited video. Money could disappear through fraud, markets, or fear. Character was built through the choices that remained after everything superficial had been stripped away. Have you ever helped someone at their lowest moment and discovered that your kindness changed their life forever? Drop a little heart in the comments if you believe love, kindness, and quiet strength are worth more than money, status, or any fortune. Subscribe for more emotional stories about second chances, hidden truth, and the moment a humble heart changes everything. Comment, "Love has no price tag," if you believe real kindness can change someone's life when they need it most.